Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Monday, September 2nd. Happy Labor Day to everyone out there, and we have a great show for you today. It is absolutely loaded. Maybe the biggest show we've had in the number of months that we've been doing this, but it's all about Week 1. We're going to jump into everything that you need to know about Week 1. USC, LSU, that's going to be segment 1. We're going to kind of work our way back throughout the weekend. We'll get to Notre Dame, A&M in segment 2, Miami absolutely taking Florida to the woodshed in segment 3. We'll combine Penn State and Georgia into one segment, kind of domination from both those teams, so want to put those two into segment 4, and then we'll just do one quick whip around. We'll go to every single other little headline that we didn't get to, and then we'll probably continue into tomorrow, because there's plenty of stuff to break down as we get ready for Week 2. But before we jump in, I do want to remind you all we get tons of questions and comments throughout the show, and the best way for you all to get your question on the screen, we can have a fun back and forth here, is to use the tip and donation link at gsmcpodcast.net if that's easier for you. But also, there's a super thanks feature on the Sports Network page. There's that little $sign at the bottom of the chat. If you want to click on that, add any question or comment you have, it will pop up on the screen, and we can have a fun back and forth here, a little bit interactive experience, and that's always good for the both of us. So utilize that if you'd like to, and gsmcpodcast.net is still up and working if that's a little bit easier for you. But let's go ahead and jump in, because we have a ton to get to, because it was a crazy week in college football, and we're going to kind of work our way back from the week. We're going to start with last night's game and work our way all the way back to the noon games on Saturday. But USC pulls off a huge win in Vegas over LSU, 27-20, and this one was really fun. There's no doubt about that. This was one that really went down to the wire, and there were so many incredible plays in this game. Frankly, if we're talking about the play on the field, it might have been the cleanest game of all week. Now, there were some coaching troubles at some points for Lincoln Riley and for Brian Kelly, but there were moments in that game where every single player on that field made really good plays. So it was a really fun game. USC comes away with a win after a pretty much last-second touchdown from Woody Marks to finish that one off. But the first thing I want to jump into is just overall takeaways of this game. And the biggest one is these are two totally different teams. And there were still issues. You know, they still gave up a ton of yards. They still had breaks and coverages. They still missed some tackles. No doubt about that. But both these defenses play with a totally different level of intent than they did a year ago. They play way more aggressive. They tackle way better than they did a year ago. The coverage, while not great, the man coverage is a lot better than it was a year ago. So a lot of strides have been taken. D'Anton Lynn coming in from UCLA to USC and Blake Baker coming from Missouri to LSU have made a big difference. There's really no two ways about that. It's very clear that these are very different teams and that they approach games differently. So a lot of aggression, particularly on the USC side, was really impressed with what they did defensively just from an effort standpoint. But moving forward, both these quarterbacks were awesome. As good as the defenses were, as impressed as I was with the defenses, both these quarterbacks were incredible. They went through their reads very quickly, got the ball out where it needed to be, on time, on target, and did everything that you could have wanted them to do to win a football game. Garrett Nussmeier went 29 of 38, over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick on the last play of the game. So very efficient performance from him. Same thing for Miller Moss that we'll get to here in a second. But overall, I mean, it was two quarterbacks that were just going at it and two defenses that were making the plays that they needed to make at the right time. So really impressive performances all the way around. And then overall, LSU's got to stop scheduling these neutral site games. They are 0-5 in their last 5 seasons. I don't think all of those are neutral site, but plenty of them were. Lost the 2 FSU games, lost this game. It's a rough performance. Pretty much every time they get into those buildings, they always come up just a little bit too short. So they might want to think about playing a couple just layup games over the next couple of years. Now, they do have Clemson next year, so we'll see what happens there. But at the end of the day, it's going to be very interesting to see if this kind of informs some schedule making in the future for the Tigers. But both these teams have a ton ahead. There's no doubt about that. This USC team just put themselves in a position where they are a playoff contender. Going forward, they are a team that absolutely can make some special things happen. And as of right now, I look at their schedule, there's probably 2 games that I wouldn't like them in. And then everything else, I think they have every ability to win that game. So it's going to be really interesting to watch that one unfold. But overall, let's get to the ways that USC won this game. We'll get to LSU a little bit later, but USC was just incredible. And the biggest thing for me was Miller Moss's comfort in this offense was unmatched. We watched two quarterbacks walk on that field for their second start ever. And they had not been in that school for only two starts. I can promise you that. They have been there for a very, very long time and have gotten very, very comfortable in this offense. And it was evident, especially with Miller Moss and an offense that is very quarterback friendly, no doubt about that, but he put the ball exactly where it needed to be on time every single time. It was really remarkable. Every single play that was a timing play where you had to wait for that tight end to clear or you had to wait for him to get past that linebacker. He made every single right play on the right time at the right place, and then made a beautiful touchdown throw to Jacoby Lane late in this one to get USC a little bit of momentum moving in the right direction. So this guy is as comfortable as you could possibly be in this offense. Went 27 for 38, 378 yards, a touchdown, but it's more than that. He get this running game going a little bit because he pushed a lot of those linebackers back with the passing game he was able to show and did so many incredible things throughout this game that I was just astounded with what he was capable of doing. I knew he was going to be a great player this year. I didn't know it was going to look like that, at least to start. So it was really, really remarkable. And obviously, the LSU defense gave him some openings, but he took full advantage. And he's a great example, along with Garrett Nussmeier, of what it looks like when you sit just a little bit, you sit 1 or 2 years, and then you allow yourself to get comfortable in the offense and let it rip in week 1. So he looked the part, he looked incredible, and he might have just started a little bit of a Heisman campaign, who knows. But D'Anton Lynn, the impact he had is a huge takeaway from this game. There's no other way to put it. It was incredible what this team was capable of doing. They did give up over 400 yards, so if you look at the stat sheet, you might not necessarily see how really incredible this defense was, but I believe there were 6 red zone possessions in this game, 20 points out of them. So it was very, very stifling when it needed to be. It was a lot of bend, don't break, and frankly, that's all that USC needs this upcoming season. They do not need to be special on the defensive side of the ball. They don't need to force a million different turnovers and do incredible things every single play. What they can do is force field goals instead of touchdowns, 3 instead of 6, and make sure that you're always keeping everything in front of you, which they did a great job of against a team that LSU definitely needs to be throwing the ball downfield a little bit more, and something that they're going to have to explore throughout the season. But overall, was really, really impressed with this group, and overall, you will go into this game thinking the one massive mismatch is LSU's offensive line against the USC defensive line. That's what we thought. That's not really how it played out. LSU's offensive line did great stuff in pass pro. The run blocking was not nearly where you need it to be going forward, and USC took full advantage. I love Kamari Ramsey on that back end. Eric Gentry was all over the field. Braylon Shelby was causing problems off the edge. This is a team that's further along. There's no two ways about that, and more than anything, it is an energy thing. It is a thing where they just walk on the field and they want to play with more aggression. They want to play with more physicality, and they're bigger than they were a year ago, which obviously helps a lot. So really impressive performance. It shows you the difference a one play caller and one person walking into that room and making that just energy flip can totally change a team. And then finally, responding was a huge, huge part of this game for USC. When you talk about a team that was put under really, really tough circumstances throughout pretty much the entirety of this game, where they're down late in the third quarter, 13 to 17, and then a couple of punts, USC then comes down the field, gets stopped, and I believe they were going in to score about 30-yard line, 25-yard line, somewhere around there. A couple of balls get batted down, and you lose a lot of momentum. Get another 3 and out right away on the defensive side of the ball, come down and score a touchdown to take the lead. It was really, really impressive what they were able to do, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, to get their offense the ball back. And then LSU came right back down, hit a field goal to tie the game, and frankly one that they very much could have scored on, but USC again was bend, don't break. And then Miller Moss just put on an absolute show. The last 2 minutes of that game were a clinic. If you are teaching your 10, 12, 14-year-old son what a 2-minute drill looks like, just turn on that tape. It was absolutely remarkable. He was on target every single time. He got the running game going when they absolutely needed it to. He played the clock perfectly to where they scored the ball with 8 seconds left in this game. It was an absolute perfect clinic from Miller Moss in this offense, and it was really remarkable. And totally different than what they did in the first half where it looked a little bit clunky. So a huge thing for them, and it was one of those things where every time you felt like LSU had that edge, every time you felt like LSU had that moment where maybe it flips towards their direction, it flipped right back to USC. So remarkable performance from this group. DeAnton Lynn is already making his impact known, and you got to assume that defense is only going to get better. And then Miller Moss is just an absolute showman, does everything that you want him to do on a football field, and in that Lincoln Riley offense looks about as comfortable as you can possibly be. But moving on to kind of just where do they go from here? Just a wrap up here real quick, but LSU, I think this is going to be a good team. This is obviously a really hard loss, and it's been a hard loss the last couple of years for this team, but at the end of the day, this defense is better. They, like LSU, had openings, had issues, had broken coverages, but they had a lot of players make some really good play. Ashton Stamps was really good in coverage for most of the day. Savion Jones was a problem in the pass rush. I thought the pass rush in general was really creative and awesome, and the blitzes that they were bringing were really hard for USC to pick up at times. So I thought it was really impressive overall. Blake Baker knows that he doesn't necessarily have the personnel that he wants to have. You're going to have to be a little bit more dynamic. You're going to have to turn up the pressure on these quarterbacks and then see where the chips fall. Garrett Nussmeier is the guy. You have to feel incredibly confident in what he did a year ago. The O-line was not necessarily what I expected. Great in pass pro, not great in run blocking, and they got to be great in both if this offense is going to be what it's capable of being. Kyron Lacey is an outright cheat code, just an absolute beast, and although he did great in the first half, was kind of silenced in the second half, so we'll see if that's something that they can kind of bounce back from. And then Aaron Anderson might just really be a second option for this team. So there's plenty of things to feel good about if you're LSU. Obviously, that 0-1 looks really bad right about now, but you got a little bit of time. You got some time to kind of get your ducks in a row. SEC play comes pretty quickly for LSU, but overall, it's one of those games that you hate it, you walk away, and you really just try to figure out how you can get that little bit better going forward. We know this defense is going to be better. We know that this offense has strides to be taken, but we'll see what happens there. It's one of those things that you don't really know too much about what LSU is going to be going forward, but you do know that the path to the CFP just got a little bit tougher for this team. And then on the USC side, this is a CFP contender. There's no other way to put it. This is a team that has still a ton of work to do, no doubt about that. But at the end of the day, they're putting on an absolute show, and they're doing things that Lincoln Riley teams have not done in the past. And it's really just a aggression thing. It's a passion thing. It's a meanness that they come onto the field with now that they did not for the first 6-7 years of Lincoln Riley's coaching career. So the play calling was much better, and more than that, the attitude of this team was incredibly better. So it was really awesome to watch this team kind of develop throughout this game, and it'll be awesome throughout the next couple of weeks. But they got Utah State, then they get a little bit of a bye before heading to Ann Arbor. It's going to be a lot of what you saw on Saturday. And there was a moment in this game in the fourth quarter where you felt like LSU was just going to be able to lean on USC and get a win and be able to run the ball out. That wasn't the case. USC was able to follow suit and was able to kind of counterpunch that and play really good run defense towards the end of this game. But Michigan's going to do the exact same thing. So we'll find out more about this team in a couple of weeks here. But a huge win for this USC team and a huge win for Lincoln Riley that very much needed this one. So overall, I think USC moves firmly into the college football playoff conversation, and obviously a ton of big-time games coming up. But man, this looks like a team that absolutely can make something happen. Then on the other side, LSU, a lot of good things to take away from this. The defense was so much better than it was a year ago. There were way less broken coverages, even though there were some, no doubt about it. The man coverage was so much better. The pass rush got there so much more often. But you are still 0-1. So you got to figure out how you rebound from this. You got to figure out how you get your feet set before you go into an SEC play that is not going to be easy by any means. So we'll see how LSU responds. We'll continue to break them down throughout the week as they get close to that week 2 game. But overall, USC, huge win. LSU just a little bit left on the bone, but still plenty in front of them for this season. So definitely going to be interesting to see how those two teams develop, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, continue to develop. But let's take our first break here, and when we come back, let's talk about that game that happened on Saturday night. Notre Dame wins a rock fight against A&M, and it was a very fun one, but we'll get to that right after this, so stick with us.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient. Hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about USC getting a huge win over LSU last night, one of those that might just put them in the CFP race, and that is something that not a lot of fans around the country want to hear because not a lot of fans love USC, but I love to see them up there. It's definitely going to be a very fun season, and another team from a little bit of a blast of the past, Notre Dame gets a huge win over A&M and launches themselves firmly into the CFP conversation. But let's jump into this one because it was a rock fight in College Station this Saturday, and Notre Dame was able to come out on top. It was an ugly game from pretty much start to finish, and I think it was one of those games that probably Marcus Freeman and Mike Elko liked a lot, frankly, being defensive guys, but man, there were times when it was a little bit tough on the eyes as a fan, I won't lie to you, but overall, the biggest takeaway is this Notre Dame team is going to ride that run offense and that run defense, or just defense in general, for quite some time this season. This team is a really, really good team. They have a lot of really good things on this team, especially on the back end of that defense when you have Xavier Watts, when you have Benjamin Morrison, when you have, I'm blanking on his name, I very much apologize, another really good player, number 29 for Notre Dame. But when you have all of those guys on defense, you're going to be able to do things a little bit differently. They are never going to be the team that goes over top and scores 50-yard touchdowns. They're not going to be the team that is going to be able to wow you on the football field, at least offensively. What they are going to be able to do is win a lot of games, and that's the goal, right? You're going to be able to walk out of the door with a 10-point win in College Station because you did just enough. A&M averaged 3.3 average yards per pass, 3.3 yards per run. So wasn't like they got a lot going by any means against this Notre Dame defense. And then on the other side, you saw why Riley Leonard was brought into this program. It wasn't necessarily because of his elite passing ability. It wasn't necessarily even because of his elite leadership ability, which was very obvious on Saturday. It was because his legs. He was that impressive. And it was the same reason that Will Howard is over at Ohio State right now, because they bring an aspect to this offense that they were missing a year ago and likely kept them from winning a couple of games a year ago. So Riley Leonard totally opened up that offense, and frankly, there was a portion in that game where that was the only consistent offense that they were getting. Overall, on the other side, they did a really bad job of putting Connor Wegman in winning positions. And it's not to say that Connor Wegman had a good day. He did not. He was very, very rough. A lot of missed spots, had 100 yards passing, I believe went 8 for 20 in completion percentage. So it was a bad day. I'm not trying to totally take all the blame off Connor Wegman, but man, there were not a lot of points where wide receivers got separation. There were not a lot of points where he had very easy routes where he can just throw them on time, on target, and them get to the wide receiver they need to get to. So at the end of the day, the biggest takeaway I have for A&M is Colin Klein's got to be better going forward. They have to be able to scheme these guys open because very obviously you don't have wide receivers that are going to be able to get open to the degree that you need them to. So you got to figure it out one way or the other, and frankly it falls a lot on the shoulders of Colin Klein and then on the shoulders of Connor Wegman right thereafter. So going to be interesting to watch that develop. Overall, Notre Dame put themselves in a remarkably good spot to make the college football playoff. There were a lot of big wins this weekend. This was comfortably the biggest because you look at the rest of their schedule. There's a Florida State game. There's a Louisville game. There's USC at the end of the year. there's not necessarily games that Notre Dame should walk in and feel bad about. There's probably not a game on that schedule, at least as of right now, that they wouldn't be favored in. So it's one of those things that Notre Dame, we knew the schedule was relatively easy. We knew if they walked out of College Station with a win, they were in really good shape, and man, did they. They feel really confident going into the rest of the year, and we'll get into how they won this game right here. The biggest thing is just Riley Leonard's ability overall. Now, we talked about the legs. It was absolutely incredible. Had over 60 yards rushing throughout this game. But the other part of it was just the poise that he played with throughout this game. It was 100 plus, 107, 110,000 fans screaming at him for 3.5 hours. It was an environment that was off the walls crazy from start to finish. And he made every play that he needed to make throughout this one. It was really, really remarkable. And I think when you walk through a lot of the different things that happened throughout this game, they were up 7, let it slip away after a pretty bad PI call against Jaden Mickey. And then on the other side, Riley Leonard rolled right down the field, 85-yard touchdown. Had 20 rushing yards, had 29 passing yards, no negative plays on the entire drive, went in for a touchdown. That's the difference that you get with Riley Leonard is you don't have this ability where you're either going to run the ball to the running back or you're going to have to throw a play action pass. You now have that ability where that defensive end has to stay a little bit more north and south and make sure that Riley Leonard is not going to pull and go off the outside. And then on the other side of it, you can just run a QB power and he could get 6 or 7 yards. So that was the big time difference. That was the thing that really gave Notre Dame the offense that they needed down the stretch of this game was hand Riley Leonard the ball, let him run the ball and see what happens, because it tends to be really good things that happen, I'll tell you that. So was really impressed with him, not only from that running ability that we all knew about, but the poise that he showed in College Station was just remarkable and gives you a good idea why Notre Dame is so confident they can play in those big-time games throughout the season. And then the O-line did just enough. It wasn't the perfect day from the O-line, but I mean, when you look at the rushing stats with Riley Leonard, 12 carries, 63 yards, Jeremiah Love, 14 carries, 91 yards and a touchdown, Jadarian Price, 8 carries, 44 yards and a touchdown, and in all of those plays, on all of the big-time plays from all of those rushers, including the Jordan Love touchdown to win this one, the blocking was perfect. They were 2 pulling guards. Everyone hit their point exactly when they needed to hit their point, and Jeremiah Love was able to break through the hole and go for 35 yards to win the game. So it was remarkable. It was one of those things where you're walking into this game and you think the big mismatch. It's the same thing that we talked about with USC and LSU. The big mismatch was A&M's D-line against Notre Dame's O-line. That was not the case. Notre Dame's O-line did plenty. Now, I think A&M had about 7 tackles for losses, so it wasn't like it was a perfect day by any means, but this is all they needed. All they needed was Sam Pendleton, Anthony Knapp to come out there and play good football. It didn't have to be perfect. They knew that it wasn't going to be perfect, but now you got a couple of weeks to figure some things out. Now you got a couple of weeks to put this offensive line together, make sure they're playing as 5, and then you have a guy like Jeremiah Love that is an outright problem for pretty much anyone that is trying to guard him on the outside or running the ball. He's really, really incredible. And then on that Jadarian Price touchdown, he made a guy miss, no doubt about it, but that hole was wide open and gave him plenty of time to prepare for that and then make that guy miss. So really, really impressive work from that offensive line that you came in feeling pretty confident that they weren't going to put on a great performance. They put on an awesome performance. There's no two ways about that. So I was really impressed with this very, very young offensive line. Only had 6 starts total going among the 5 going into this game. So really, really impressive, and one that you got to feel a lot more confident about that unit going forward if you're a Fighting Irish fan. And then A&M's offensive issues did a lot to help this team. There's no two ways about that. When you talk about what Connor Wegman did out there, it was ugly. They 12 for 20, 100 yards, 3.3 average yards per pass, 2 picks, no touchdowns. It was about as ugly as you could possibly get it. And I will say, I think a lot of this falls on Colin Klein's shoulders. You know what you have in that room. That wide receiver room cannot get separation the way that you need them to, plain and simple. They are not able to get the amount of separation against man coverage that you need to get, especially in the SEC where you're going to play a number of really good corners all throughout the schedule. You're going to have to get that, and if they can't get it themselves, you got to scheme them open. And this is something that Colin Klein probably should have known going into this game, but especially coming out of it, he knows it very, very obviously. Now, there were some moments that Connor Wegman was put in the right positions. There were some moments where these wide receivers did get separation, and he missed them, including overthrowing a 6'6" wide receiver in Noah Thomas. So I'm not taking anything off of Connor Wegman necessarily. He did not play a pretty game, and when he was given those moments to really seize an opportunity, he fell massively short. There's no two ways about that. But at the end of the day, if Colin Klein knows what he has, if he knows that these wide receivers cannot get separation, if he knows that Garrett Nussmeier is going to miss some of those throws as he's getting pressured, he has to be able to scheme them open. He has to be able to move the pocket and kind of negate a pass rush. He has to be able to get a little bit more dink and dunky from time to time and make sure that they're moving the sticks down the field. It just has to be a better game plan overall to put these guys in chances to win. And overall, the biggest takeaway that I had is losing Evan Stewart this past offseason was huge for this offense. If he's on the field, that's one guy that can make great separation, and it totally changes the complexion of this game. Top to bottom, it would be totally different if Evan Stewart was on that field, but he wasn't. And then the A&M offensive line did not look the part. This was a very, very good defensive line on the other side. I'm not taking anything away from that defensive line, but man, the A&M offensive line does not look like the unit that you needed to going throughout the rest of this season. So if that's not something that's fixed, then you can pretty much just say that's going to be the offensive performance going forward. Just plain and simple. Connor Wegman, if he's not going to get protected, if he's not going to get put in situations to win, there's no world where he's able to execute at the level that he hypothetically can. Now, this one was really, really ugly against a really good defense, but at the end of the day, he's got to be so much better. The play calling has to be so much better. The offensive line has to be so much better. The wide receivers have to be so much better. So everything has to be better on the offensive side of the ball for A&M. Now, the defensive, you feel pretty good about, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. But this one is not great for A&M. But overall, let's do where do they go from here? How do they kind of recap, and how do they get into conference play for A&M, and what is a layup of a schedule for Notre Dame? How do they kind of continue on in their path? And for A&M, it's a little bit easier than some of the others from this weekend because you know what side of the ball is the problem. You know it's offensive, and if you figure out the offensive side of the ball, you're going to have a really good shot to win a lot of games this year. Now, that's easier said than done. Connor Wegman, as we talked about, had a terrible day. The leading receiver was Jade Walker, 31 yards, 6 catches. 5 players made catches in this game, and the long was 18 yards, second play of the game. So this was ugly top to bottom. When you talk about passing the ball, they got a little bit going in the run game, but not much by any means. So it's one of those things that A&M, at the very least, they know what the problem is, and now they can fully attack that problem, but it might go a little bit deeper than we want it to go. So A&M has a chance to bounce back. They can get back from this and possibly go 4-0 in the next 4. They got Florida and Arkansas that are coming up that are going to be tough games, but they have the ability to get some things rolling, and then that Missouri game comes around and we'll figure out exactly what A&M is about. And that Florida game just got a lot more important, and we'll talk about that next segment. But overall, an incredible performance from Notre Dame. It's one of those things that you're rolling forward and you feel incredible. I don't know if there's a part of this team that you don't feel great about now. The wide receivers still aren't where you want them to be. The passing game is still a little bit benign in nature, but at the end of the day, if you're going to get this type of performance from your defense, and if you're going to get that type of performance from your offensive line, you're going to be able to win most of the games on your schedule, at least 10, probably 11, and then you're in the playoff. And then you just see what happens at the end of the day. You have a gamer in Riley Leonard, a guy that absolutely can make all the types of plays that you need him to make, and then maybe a guy like Bo Collins that showed up a little bit on Saturday night can continue to take steps forward. I think Chris Mitchell is going to be a bigger part of the game plan going forward. Was not much in this game, but definitely will be going forward. And I think this offense did enough, right? They did enough on Saturday to get the job done. The defense did them plenty of favors in doing that, but they did enough to get the job done, and now it's about just slowly getting better and putting yourself in a position where maybe inevitably when you get to that college football playoff, you're ready to roll. You've taken the step forward on the offensive line, at the quarterback position, at the wide receiver position, and you can really hit the ground running. But right now, Notre Dame's got to feel great. You are in probably as much as anyone in the country, you are as confident in your ability to make the playoff after week 1 as anyone. There's no doubt about that. So really impressive performance from Notre Dame. Incredible from Marcus Freeman to get his guys ready to walk into a nightmare of an atmosphere and get a big-time win. So this might have been the most impressive win of the weekend, although the one I'm about to talk about in the next segment was downright impressive as well. So that was an incredible game. Notre Dame obviously in the driver's seat for the CFP, feel really confident in their ability. A&M plenty still in front of them, and a lot of things that they have to fix on the offensive side of the ball, but you put Connor Wegman in better situations going forward, then I still think this is a team that can make some noise in the SEC and at the very least play some spoiler for a team up top. But we'll see what happens with those teams. Obviously, we'll continue to break them down as they move on throughout the season. But let's take our second break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the beatdown that happened in Gainesville, Florida on Saturday. Miami went to work in this game, and it was so much fun to watch. And if you weren't a Florida fan, it was so much fun to watch. But we'll break down everything from this game, including just Cam Ward. I'll leave it at that for the time being, but we'll talk about that right after this break, so stick with us.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about that A&M Notre Dame game. A little bit of a rock fight, but Notre Dame does just enough to get that win. Jeremiah Love is going to be a weapon for that team going forward, and he was the one that scored the game-winning touchdown there. But let's get into the one that really took people by surprise, and maybe it didn't take everyone by surprise, but it got me. I won't lie about it. This was one that was just off the walls crazy from the get-go, and it was all on one direction. It wasn't just crazy both directions. Miami just went to work. They absolutely took Florida to the woodshed in this game. It was incredible to watch this, and for everything that you can take away from this game, all of the different things that Miami did well and Florida didn't do well, the biggest thing you have to take away is this kid is a magician. Cam Ward did stuff on that football field that was outright insane. And it's not only the play on the field, because he did plenty of things that were stupid. There was the one play, the touchdown throw to Jacoby George late in that game. I don't know how many people release that pass. I know even less that make that throw in there. It was absolutely ridiculous what he was doing out there on that football field, and more than anything, it was in front of 100,000 people. He was as calm as can be. There was never a moment where it looked like he was flustered. It was never a moment where he looked like he was over his skis or confused or anything. He was just rolling from start to finish. He went to work on this Florida defense, and it was incredible to watch. Overall, one of the other takeaways is this Miami team looks the part. They finally look like the team that Mario Cristobal had dreamed up in his mind when he took over this job. They are dominant on the offensive and defensive line, and frankly, I didn't think they were going to be that dominant, but man, were they. They were really good. They have incredible wide receivers. They have so much talent on this team, and it finally looks like the team that Mario Cristobal wanted to have a couple of years ago. So incredible performance from this team, and it feels like the stars are starting to align for this Miami team just a little bit. On the other side, Florida has issues. There's no two ways about it. And frankly, it would be one thing if the issues were a little bit new to this season, just figuring out some of the new personnel. They're not. A lot of them are the same exact thing. It's being undisciplined. It's not being nearly as tough as you need to be. And frankly, looking a little bit unprepared. And that falls fully on the coaching staff, which we'll get to here in a second. But if things couldn't get worse, Graham Mertz goes down late in this game, and DJ Lagway comes in and throws a pick. So it wasn't necessarily the prettiest day from start to finish for Florida. And they had a lot of the problems that you saw a year ago, and you were hoping they would take a step forward in this year, but they did not by any means, at least through week one, did not by any means. And then Billy Napier, he's not fired. He's still the head coach of Florida Gators, but he might as well not be. I'm trying not to overreact to this situation. I'm trying not to get a little bit over my skis here, but this crowd was taken out of it very quickly. And it tells you one very obvious thing, which is they didn't really have faith. They wanted to have faith. They loved this team, and they really wanted to believe that they could prove all the doubters wrong and go 8-4 and be one of those big-time stories of the college football season. They were out of this thing in about a quarter, and so was the crowd. And the Miami crowd took entirely over, and it's because they don't really believe in the head guy. And Billy Napier, I think, is doing the best he can, frankly. I think he's trying the best he can, but that's not good enough. We all understand that. It's Florida. You have to be able to play better football in Gainesville in the first game of the season against Miami. That should never be a question of, we're going to play hard, we're going to play physical. Maybe you lose that game. Maybe you come on the wrong side. That's not necessarily where I'm going to bury Florida. If this was 31-30, then I'm not going to bury Florida. But this one was ugly from the jump. This looked like a team that did not want to be there and did not play the aggression that they needed to, and frankly, was not as prepared as they needed to be. So Billy Napier is not fired. He's still the head coach of Florida football, but man, there is a ticking clock. I can promise you that. And a lot of people in that Florida room are having some very tough conversations, and Scott Strickland is rethinking that quote that he had on Paul Feinbaum last week. But let's get to reasons Miami won. Cam Ward is the number one reason. This kid is magic. 26 for 35, 385 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick that was a little bit him getting a little bit too big for his britches on that throw. Threw a little bit across the body, missed a guy, and threw a pick. But at the end of the day, did everything that you wanted him to do. And more than that, more than, the stats and the throws and all of the tangible stuff, this guy has brought out a part in this team that has not been there for a very long time. I'm 23 years old. I missed a lot of what Miami was, early on in the 2000s. I missed a lot of what that Miami was. This was the first time I saw what Miami should be. This was the first time I saw a Miami team walk on the field and look like Miami and look like the team that takes pride in the U and takes pride in that logo and plays with an aggression that is just insane. It was really, really remarkable from this team, and frankly, it was without one of the most aggressive players in the country in Ruben Bain, and we'll get to that here in a second, but it was incredible. This guy plays with a confidence, a swag, a ability that everyone on the team feels. Whether you're offense, defense, special teams, they feed off this guy. He is the outright leader of this team, and he just showed up in spring. It is remarkable what this kid has been able to do, and that's the best game I've seen him play in quite some time, all the way back to probably Incarnate Word. So really remarkable performance, and probably shot himself up to the Heisman, top of the Heisman conversation after Saturday. But obviously that's something we'll unpack maybe tomorrow just a little bit. But the other part of this is just line of scrimmage domination. It was absolutely glaringly obvious which team was bigger, which team was stronger, and which team wanted it more in a lot of different ways. Florida had only 1 sack and 2 tackles for loss. On the other side, Miami had 3 sacks and 8 tackles for loss. That is a huge, huge difference. And Graham Mertz, if you know anything about him as a quarterback, if you're not going to protect him, he's not going to be successful. Plain and simple. He doesn't have the athletic ability to get out of those bad situations. So if those tackles are going to play at that level the entire season, he's going to get dominated. And frankly, I would be surprised if he didn't get injured again throughout this season, because there were too many hits on that guy throughout this game. So that's something they're very much going to have to figure out. And Florida just lacked a lot of physicality at the point of attack. And it's not because of the bodies that they have out there, because you look at the measurables, they're downright ridiculous. This team is big. This team is strong. This team has everything at their disposal to be a big, strong, physical team, and they're just not. At least comparative to Miami, and frankly, those are the teams you should be comparing yourself to if you're Florida. I understand you're a little bit behind in terms of win total and doing what you want to do the last couple of seasons, but you're Florida. There's no two ways about you having to be at the very top of the sport, at least in the conversation, but it hasn't been that way for quite some time, and frankly, I think there are some people talking about that Dan Mullen fire in some different terms right about now than they were when it happened. But the other part of this was the talent level at the pass catching positions for Miami is just incredible. It's so multiple, it's so different, and it hits you from so many different directions that it's really hard to get a beat on. Obviously, Xavier Restrepo is the leader here, had 7 catches, over 100 yards, a touchdown, but Elijah Arroyo, a guy we talked about last week, 4 catches, 89 yards, made a ton of big-time catches for them throughout this game. Isaiah Horton made a ton of catches, 4 catches, 70 yards. So it's a really, really potent attack. It's one of those that the ball's going to go to Xavier Restrepo a lot of the time. He's going to be the guy that gets the vast majority of the targets. He's going to be where the ball is funneled a lot. But they have so many other guys that are going to be able to hurt you that you can take away Restrepo all you want. Then it's going to be Jacoby George, and it's going to be Elijah Arroyo. It's going to be Isaiah Horton. It's going to be Sam Brown. It's going to be all of these other guys. So it's going to be a little bit of a nightmare for people to figure out where the ball's going, and then more importantly than that, stop the guy that has the ball, because there are a lot of dynamic guys with the ball in their hand for Miami. So that was a huge discrepancy in this game. Is Miami had the dudes catching the balls and Florida just outright didn't. So this is just incredible performance from Miami, and it goes to show you what a portal class can do for a team. Cam Ward came in there, and I understand he's one player. I understand he can only do so much in a game where you got 22 guys that have to do their job, but he's totally transformed this team. He's made this team totally different from an intent standpoint, from an energy standpoint, from a what they think they are capable to do standpoint. He is everything to that team, and he is the heartbeat of that team, and they could not have got him at a better time. So a huge pickup there, but where do they go from here? Because there's a lot of questions to ask on the Florida side of things. There's no two ways about that. I'm having a hard time coming up with an answer for this one, because frankly, this team heard all the noise. They knew that their coach was going to be under fire. They knew that people were picking him to win 4 or 5 games this upcoming season. They knew they were playing an in-state rival in week 1 at home, and they came out there and put out a dud. It's impossible for me to sit here and say, this is the way that they fix this. This is the way that they go forward, and this is the way that they have a salvageable season, because there were so many things wrong on Saturday that it's impossible for me to sit here and say, if Florida does this, this, and this, maybe they can put together a good season. It might just be the end. And I hate to say that for Florida fans, and I really don't want to say that after week 1, because I don't want to be that guy that fully overreacts, but this Billy Napier and this staff came into this year knowing for a fact that if they did not deliver, especially in this game, frankly, because it's Miami, because it's the opening week, if they didn't deliver, they were going to be on the hot seat. They fully understood that. That was kind of written in stone almost. And they were terrible. It was bad from a preparation standpoint. It was bad from from adjustments, in-game adjustment standpoint. It was bad from pretty much every single thing you could do on the football field. Florida didn't do it well on Saturday. And now you're sitting here wondering, what do you do? What is the way forward? Obviously, Montrell Johnson was awesome, and that's Montrell Johnson. He's going to be awesome, but you need more. You need more from this team, and frankly, the way I'm looking at it right now, if they fall to A&M in 2 weeks, if they lose that game at home, I would not be surprised at all if it was a new head coach, if it was a new quarterback in DJ Lagway, and they just saw where the chips fall the rest of the season. It's gonna be ugly. There's no doubt about that, but at least you get to see something new. At least maybe DJ Lagway can be swayed into staying, but overall, I mean, Saturday might have just been the beginning of what's going to be a really, really gross time in Florida football. But then, on the other side, it's all systems go. Miami is now the team firmly the team to beat in the ACC with everything else that happened in the ACC this past couple of weeks. But overall, I think they did everything you wanted to do. 10 different players caught passes, led by Restrepo, obviously. 10.7 yards per pass for Miami, 4.7 for Florida. You had 9-minute possession advantage for Miami. It was just everything went in that direction. Frankly, if someone can find a stat that went in Florida's direction, please send it my way, because I have yet to find one. Miami just dominated this game from start to finish, and it was in Florida's building. It was about as embarrassing as any performance this entire weekend. So it was rough. If I'm going to be nitpicky for Miami, I'd like to see a little bit more from that run game, a little bit more from Damian Martinez and Mark Fletcher Jr. going forward, but they didn't need it on Saturday, so you might as well not use it. So it's going to be awesome to watch this team develop over the next little bit. They have Florida A&M, they have Ball State, and then they do have a big challenge against South Florida going to South Florida, so we'll see what this team's about throughout the season. Obviously, they're not near the finish line and still have so much work to do, but man, if you were a Miami fan and you had a checklist of 10, 20 things that you wanted Miami to do on Saturday, they checked off pretty much all of them. It was really, really remarkable to watch this team go to work, and they put themselves right in the driver's seat of the ACC, put themselves in the driver's seat for a possible college football playoff run, and then on the other side, Florida put themselves in a position where a coaching change could very well come pretty soon. And I don't know how soon. I think if they lose that A&M game, I might just be on watch for that headline to come through. But we'll obviously unpack that when it does happen, or if it does happen. I don't want to bury him yet, but if it does happen, we will obviously unpack all of that. But definitely going to be an incredible couple of weeks and an incredible year for Miami. It feels like with a couple of wins we got yesterday with Notre Dame, USC, and Miami, just a little bit of a throwback in college football, going back to about the 80s through the 2000s. Those are the teams, and now they're back up at the top. So it'll be interesting to see how they develop throughout the season, but huge wins for all of those teams in week one. But let's take our third break here, and when we come back, we're going to kind of combine Penn State and Georgia into one segment, dominating wins over Clemson and West Virginia respectively, and man, it's going to be really fun to break these ones down because it was domination. There are a lot of really fun things to take away for the winning teams in this one. So we'll break it down right after this, so stick with us.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about Miami just splattering Florida for 4 quarters in Gainesville on Saturday. It was an absolute domination, maybe the most impressive performance of the entire weekend, but let's get into Penn State and Georgia. Also, how you doing, Wolverine Gage? I am doing great because we're talking college football. That's all I need on a Monday, so it's going to be an incredible couple of weeks, but Georgia and Penn State gave us some really good performances on Saturday, and I want to jump into these, and we'll start with that Penn State game because this was one that a lot of people going in, including myself, was pegging this one as kind of a little bit of a battle. You're walking into Morgantown, West Virginia. You're facing a crowd that is going to be loud, is going to be rowdy, and Penn State didn't care about any of that. They came out there and they absolutely rolled over this team for 4 quarters. Even with a rain delay that was outright monsoon, they were able to pull this one off. So overall, the biggest takeaway is Andy Kotelnicki has made the biggest difference on this offense as you could possibly imagine. They are totally different. They let this team be who they are, which is you have an elite quarterback in Drew Aller. At least we're talking about arm talent. There is nothing he can't do on a football field. They're finally letting him do that. Harrison Wallace is getting open and being the special athlete that he can be. Nick Singleton is finally breaking runs again and doing the special things that he's capable of doing. There are so many awesome things to pull away from this game, and frankly, we'll get into them a little bit later, but Harrison Wallace taking over as the true wide receiver 1 for this team is as big of a development over this weekend as really any of them. It's absolutely huge for this team and definitely puts them in a position where now they're in really good spot for this Big Ten race, but obviously something we'll unpack throughout the season. But that rain delay definitely did play a factor in this game. It was an outright monsoon there for a minute, and it kind of took the crowd just entirely out of this game. Now, they were getting dominated before that, don't get me wrong, but this crowd was definitely a little bit sparse after that rain delay, and it definitely played a factor towards the end of this game. But the biggest reasons Penn State won, we talked about it, the Kotelnicki effect is very obvious. Last year, Penn State, I believe, had 8 plays over 40 yards the entire season. They had 4 of them yesterday. It was absolutely remarkable. They were able to push the ball downfield. They got Nick Singleton loose for a 40-yard touchdown, 55-yard catch by Amari Evans, a 50-yard touchdown to Trey Wallace on that beautiful ball from Drew Aller. It was remarkable to watch this team over 200 yards passing and rushing in this game. Everything went the way that you wanted it to go for Andy Kotelnicki's debut, and it's obvious why they made this hire, and it's obvious why Andy Kotelnicki is one of the fastest rising stars in college football right now. The other part of this that goes with Andy Kotelnicki is they let Drew Aller be Drew Aller. Last year you were watching this guy, and it wasn't frustrating because he was playing bad football, because he 29 touchdowns, 2 picks. He was very efficient throughout the year, just couldn't beat those 2 big teams, but I wanted to see him push the ball down the field. I knew he had elite arm strength. I knew he had elite arm talent. I wanted to see more of it, and we saw a ton of it on Saturday. He was able to throw incredible balls. The fade to Wallace for a touchdown. The post that we just talked about, that was outright incredible. A number of out routes and corner routes that he threw on a dime. It was really awesome to watch this kid go to work. Went 11 for 17, 216 yards, 3 touchdowns. Did everything that you needed him to do, and frankly, if he's going to get better from here, there's not going to be a lot of offense or defenses in the country that are going to be able to stop what he did on Saturday. So really, really impressive performance, did everything that you want him to do, and now it's just about continuing to build for that young man. The other part of this is stifling the run. We knew that West Virginia was going to come in here and run the ball, and if they weren't going to be able to do that, it was going to get ugly, and that's exactly what happened. C.J. Donaldson had 12 carries, 42 yards, and a touchdown. Jaheim White, 8 carries, 33 yards. Garrett Green, 10 carries, 5 yards. And we talked about it. That could have been the big equalizer in this game, is Garrett Green possibly getting out on a couple of big-time rushes. That didn't happen once. So really impressive from Tom Allen and this defensive staff to keep everything in front of them. The average yards per carry, 2.3. The long carry of the day was 12 yards. So it was just outright domination from start to finish on the lines of scrimmage for this team, and is a good offensive line for West Virginia. It's not a slouch by any means. So definitely a huge performance, and one that Penn State can really build from, that's for sure. Where they go from here, I think for West Virginia, it's just regroup, burn that tape, and move forward. It's really that simple. You still have the Big 12 in front of you. You still have Garrett Green that does need to play much better football going forward, but very talented player. You have Albany next week. You have at Pitt, and then you have 2 huge ones against Kansas and at Oklahoma State. So we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks for West Virginia. Definitely not the performance that they had in mind in week 1, but I think they're still in good shape. They have some tough games in front of them, but they're still a team that absolutely can make some noise, and maybe Penn State is just a buzzsaw this upcoming year. And then on the Penn State side, this team looks the part. For the first time in quite a long time, they look the part of a team that not only can win a ton of the big-time games and go 10-2 and make the playoff, but maybe can beat Ohio State, maybe can win one of those playoff games, maybe can do some of those things that have eluded them over the past little bit and have kept them on that second tier of college football. So cannot wait to see what this team can do. They're pretty much in good shape till October 12th, and when they go to USC for that one. If they win that one, then this is one of the most talked about teams in the country, and they are firmly in the college football playoff conversation, and it's going to look really interesting to see what they can do against Ohio State and the other big teams in this conference, because obviously that's the big time hurdle and something that they're going to have to deal with this upcoming year. But as of right now, it looks really, really good for Penn State. I can tell you that. Moving on to Georgia and Clemson. Beatdown, just an outright domination from start, not even from start to finish. This was from halftime to finish. It was an outright beatdown, and that was one of the biggest things. Whatever the halftime speech was from Kirby Smart was outright aggressive. I can promise you that. It worked magic on this team, and they went out and were dominant in the second half on both sides of the ball, but particularly on the offensive side of the ball. Carson Beck went to work in the second half. They allowed him to kind of spread out that defense just a little bit, get passing a little bit more often. 9 different players caught passes in this game, so everything went right for this team. And frankly, when the ball's in the hands of Carson Beck, a lot of things tend to go right for this team. And then we have to talk about what Malachi Starks does in Mercedes-Benz. I don't know what it is about him walking into that building, but he's given some type of power. It's some type of thunderstruck type situation where he touches something in that building, and it gives him the power of probably 10 different DBs. He's absolutely insane and makes a crazy play on the ball pretty much every time he's in that building. So I don't know what it is. I don't know what happens in the gallows of Mercedes-Benz that makes him the player that he is in that building, but man, that kid can make some really remarkable plays on the football field. I'll leave it at that right now. But the reasons Georgia won, halftime adjustments were huge. Mike Bobo and this offense were running the ball really not effectively in the first half. The defensive line for Clemson was making a number of big-time plays. They weren't really spreading the ball out the way that they wanted to. And then on the second half, they came out 2 back-to-back 75-yard touchdown drives. Carson Beck was outright perfect throughout those drives, and everything was exactly the way that you wanted it to be. So it turned from a defensive battle to a beatdown very, very quickly. Elite players were getting open. The offensive line played so much better, and everything was better in the second half, really. So huge shout out to the coaching staff over at Georgia, and gives you an idea of why they are the best team in the country. And then the Carson Beck show, 23 for 33, 278 yards, 2 touchdowns. His numbers are never going to beat you over the head. He's not that type of quarterback. This is not that type of offense. What it is this dude is as efficient as you could possibly be. Everything is right where it needs to be. All of the timing of every single play is exactly the way that you want it to be, and he got enough from his run game with a couple of key guys out in Trevor Etienne and Roderick Robinson. Nate Frazier, the freshman, showed up in a huge way, 87 yards, 1 touchdown, did plenty on the ground to give him those openings, but man, this guy comes out on the field with a confidence, with a swagger, and plays this game just so cleanly throughout the entirety of the game and has been doing it for quite some time. And frankly, he could be on his way to a Heisman Trophy type year. So it's remarkable to watch this guy play, and he just puts on a show every time that he's out there. But then defensive domination was a huge part of this. Georgia's defense that a lot of people were skeptical about coming in, especially the interior of that defensive line that had some issues throughout this game, but not many, I'll be honest with you. The long run of the day for Clemson was 9 yards, 1 pass over 20 yards. That was a ridiculous catch and a ridiculous pass, frankly, to Antonio Williams. Cade Klubnik, 18 for 29, 142 yards, 1 interception. Leading receiver had 76 yards. It was Antonio Williams. The next highest was Jake Burningstool. He had 26, and there was only 3 guys over 20 yards receiving. It was domination. Start to finish, this UGA defense was all over them, and we knew it was going to be a little bit weaker than 21 and 22. It might not be that much weaker. This is a very, very good defense, and if they can figure out that pass rush even more, it's going to be scary for a lot of teams they got to face. But where do they go from here? Clemson, this is a really confusing answer, because it might just be you don't go anywhere this upcoming year, and then you wait till the offseason. You hope that Dabo Swinney changes his ways and goes into the portal, and we'll get into that too a little bit more tomorrow. But overall, you have a lot of questions on offense. Cade Klubnik just has to take steps forward. He did not, at least obviously on Saturday, but at the end of the day, the good news is there's no more Georgia on your schedule. You have the ability to turn the page. App State does come to town next week. That could get a little bit sketchy, and then you have NC State at home. So it's not like they can take their foot off the gas pedal too much, but at least it's not the Bulldogs on the other side of the field. That makes you feel a little bit better. They're still a threat in the ACC, but this was a beating in the second half, and it makes me feel just a little bit worried about this Clemson team. And then on the Georgia side of things, it is exactly what Georgia is. At this point, they could win any number of games. And at the end of the day, on Monday, they go back to work. That's what this program has been for the last couple of years. And that's why every time they show up, they look as ready as anyone could possibly be for that game. So this was a message sender, no doubt about that. They let everyone know that they are still Georgia. No one's taken their place up top, but they still have a tough road ahead of them. They still have those games at Alabama, at Ole Miss, at Texas, and we'll have to figure out what happens. But at the end of the day, this is the best team in the country. They showed that in week 1 without any doubt, and they're moving forward into week 2 as the number 1 team in the country. So really remarkable performance in that second half for Georgia. For Penn State, that went about as smoothly as you could possibly have hoped if you're a Nittany Lion fan. So a couple of dominating performances there, but let's take our final break here. We are running a little bit long because of how much stuff went on this weekend, but let's get to our last segment. We'll do a little bit of a whip around, get to Friday night games. We'll get to the big upset, or 2 big upsets that happened this past weekend, and then we'll get to some teams that narrowly avoided upsets this past weekend. So we'll break that down right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the Penn State and Georgia games, a couple of just outright beatdowns in those two games that a lot of us expected to be just a little bit closer, including myself. But let's jump into the last segment here, and there's plenty still to get to. So let's do a little bit of a whip around a million different things that we'll jump into. So let's get in real quick, and let's start with that Oklahoma game on Friday. We'll do a couple of Friday games and then work our way through the Saturday slate. But OU gets a dominating win over Temple. It did not feel all that dominating, if I'm being totally honest. It wasn't that they weren't able to put up crazy stats and get the ball downfield and do some of the things that Jackson Arnold really loved, but it was layered in a sense of worry because this O-line was not good. Temple had 3 sacks, 5 tackles for loss, and this is a far from elite team in Temple. I understand there were some people that were out for this O-line. Branson Hickman went down early in this game, but at the end of the day, this is not near where they need to be for this SEC play. Tennessee is going to come to town in a couple of weeks. If they are not much, much better on that offensive line, James Pierce Jr. could just take over that game and totally bury Oklahoma. So it was an issue going into the season. We knew it was going to be an issue, and it was obvious, even against Temple, that it's going to be an issue throughout this year for Oklahoma. So something they got to figure out. Definitely still have plenty of time to do it, but it's going to get a little bit sketchy here once you get into SEC play if that's the offensive line that you're trotting out. On the other side of things, TCU got a big-time win, 34-27 over Stanford. This was a sloppy game, pretty much start to finish. Ashton Daniels was a little bit all over the place at times. Alec Ayomanyor was impressive. He is always impressive every time he's on the football field. But overall, this TCU team is just more complete. Cam Cook had a late touchdown to win it. Overall, TCU was really rough. 100 yards penalties. The running game was good at times, but definitely was stifled at times. I think overall, both these teams came out of this one not feeling super great. I think there were a number of things that they want to clean up, and obviously TCU gets the win, so that subsides some things, but definitely plenty of things to fix for the Horned Frogs. But moving on to the big upset of the weekend, Vanderbilt gets one over Virginia Tech, 34-27 in Nashville, and this one came down to the quarterbacks. Frankly, this was the only game of the weekend that was won by a double-digit underdog. 56-1 were the double-digit favorites in this weekend, and we could get one later tonight with Boston College beating Florida State possibly, but as of right now, that is outright insane and a true testament to what Vandy was able to do, and it comes down to the guy that was calling all the shots for this team. Diego Pavia put on a show. It was 12 for 16 passing, but 294 total yards, 194 on the ground, 3 touchdowns, 2 through the air, 1 on the ground. He was all over the place. He made every single play that you possibly could want as a Vandy fan. And then on the other side of things, Virginia Tech could not run the ball, and it included Kyron Jones. He had 16 carries for 19 yards, so even though he went 22 for 33, 300 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 1 INT, but overall a relatively okay passing day, couldn't get anything going on the ground. And as we all know, that's the place that Kyron Jones really separates himself as a player, so needed that badly and did not get it, and went down with a calf injury late in this game. Don't know the status on him going into week 2, but definitely something to watch as they go into, I believe, playing Old Dominion, so definitely going to be one to watch there. Then there were a number of other teams that barely staved off some upsets that we'll get to here in a minute, but a huge win for this team in Vandy, for this team, for Virginia Tech. They have a lot to figure out. There's no two ways about that. Aren't out of the ACC by any means because of how the ACC played this past weekend, so they're still in the thick of things for the ACC, but as of right now, it looked very, very ugly on Saturday, and I don't know if this team is quite what I thought they were going to be coming in. I might have just been a little bit wrong about this Virginia Tech team. The other upset was a little bit more dominating fashion. I realize now I've forgotten to change that picture. I apologize for that. But UNLV knocks off Houston 27-7. I don't know how this happened, frankly, but UNLV is a really good team. I do know that. They did a really, really good job. Donovan Smith on the other side of things for Houston, 2 picks, 38 total yards rushing for Houston in this game. Their leading receiver had 57 total yards. it was gross from start to finish for Houston offensively, and UNLV was able to do just enough. It wasn't even that pretty of a game from UNLV. Matthew Sluka made enough plays, but it was not all that pretty, and they still beat that Houston team by 20 points. So gives you an idea of what that UNLV team is capable of, and definitely a very interesting team to watch throughout this season. But let's get to some close calls because a lot of teams just escaped. South Carolina beats Old Dominion 23-19, and this one was bad. South Carolina looked outright terrible on offense. 114 yards passing, had 3.1 yards per carry, ran the ball 56 times in this game because they know they can't pass the ball. It's going to be a very, very rough season if this is the way they're going to go about business. And the only 2 touchdowns that South Carolina scored came because Old Dominion fumbled the ball with inside the 10. So one big mistake taken away from this game, and South Carolina comes out on the wrong side, and they are the story of the weekend. So a very, very tough performance. They have Kentucky, and then they have LSU coming up. Does not get easier. It could be a very, very ugly couple of weeks for Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks, and maybe just an ugly season overall. Who knows? But moving on, UCLA was able to get a win over Hawaii 16-13. This one was gross. UCLA was down for the vast majority of this game, down 7-0 at half, trailed 13-10 before Braden Schrager threw a pick that let UCLA back in this game. Overall, this was just bad offensively. Ethan Garbers was all over the place. He was their leading rusher on a team that has TJ Harden on it. That's absolutely ridiculous. He had 9 carries for 9 yards in this game. Cannot happen again. And overall, Hawaii very likely could have won this game, but just left a couple of points on the table. For UCLA, it might just get ugly over the next couple of weeks. They have a bye week. They have Indiana, LSU, Oregon, Penn State. It's going to get really, really rough for this team over the next little bit, and it's going to be a tough start to the Deshaun Foster era over there in LA. Northwestern got a win, I suppose, over Miami of Ohio 13-6. This obviously was an absolutely gross game. There's no two ways about that. Both teams had a missed field goal. Notre Dame had 2 fumbles. Miami of Ohio had 2 picks. Mike Wright and Cam Porter were the only offense that Northwestern had to speak of overall, and that was them running the ball, not Mike Wright throwing the ball by any means. So very, very ugly performance, and this was a number of performances for Big Ten teams throughout this week. On Friday night, Michigan State put together maybe the grossest performance of the weekend. Truly, it was outright disgusting what this team put on film, but there was a stretch at the start of this game where the possessions went INT, punt, safety, fumble, INT, punt, INT. It is outright insane that they were able to do that. I mean, all of this stuff was outright terrible. Michigan State had 12 penalties, 140 yards, some of the most undisciplined football you've ever seen. And then Aiden Childs at quarterback, 10 for 24, 114 yards, 2 picks. They were very lucky to win this game. This was outright ugly, and pretty much every aspect of this game was ugly. There's very hard ways to find a good thing for Michigan State coming out of this one, and they do not get to rest very often, so it's going to be really interesting to see what this team can do throughout the rest of the season. I think Aiden Childs is plenty talented, but until he stops throwing the ball just downfield pretty much every time, he's going to have a problem. So it's going to be interesting to watch him develop, but moving on, Wisconsin escaped one as well against Western Michigan 28-14. Ches Malusi and Tawi Walker did just enough in the run game, only had 192 passing yards. The leading receiver was Will Paulding, obviously, with 60 yards, but they got enough on the ground to get this one, and frankly, that muff punt from Western Michigan did them a ton of favors because Wisconsin won pretty much every aspect of this game. If you look at the stat sheet, you would think Wisconsin won pretty comfortably, but they just could not finish. They didn't do anything well in the red area. They didn't do anything well when it comes down to the points where you really need to execute, especially in the Big Ten. So it's going to be interesting to watch that team develop, but that was a rough performance to start things off for Luke Fickell in that second year. And then we had I got these a little bit out of order, but Iowa State, I do want to get you guys a little bit ready for that Cyhawk game that's coming up this weekend. Iowa State beats North Dakota State 21-3. This one was weird. Iowa State scored 48 seconds into this game, and they didn't score again until right before halftime. And this game was really short. There were only 16 possessions in the entire game, and in the first half, North Dakota literally had a drive that went 12 minutes. And I'm not joking. 12 minutes of game time, and they got a field goal out of it. It was outright insane. So it was one of those games that 21-3 doesn't look all that great. I fully understand that. But at the end of the day, when you have that much air taken out of the ball and you have that few possessions, it's not all that ugly. The wide receivers had a really good day with Higgins and Noel making really good plays. And overall, I wouldn't worry too much if I was an Iowa State fan. Now, the run game was not good. It definitely needs to take a step forward. But overall, I think this is one of those that the scoreboard doesn't look all that great. But if you look at the story of the game, it's not quite as bad as the scoreboard shows. And then we had Iowa scoring points for the first time in a very long time. That was wild to watch for sure. It was one of those things that was really, really incredible from this team. I think there was a great stat that I saw. Reese Vanderzee, a very talented freshman wide receiver, had 5 catches, 66 yards, 2 touchdowns. In fact, Iowa had more wide receiver touchdowns in the second half of this game than they had the entirety of 2023. That is outright ridiculous, and it shows you where they were at offensively the last little bit, and maybe they're turning a little bit of a corner. I'm still very, very skeptical, but at the end of the day, over 240 yards on the ground and passing, got to feel pretty good about that. So a good performance from Iowa. You set up a great game in Iowa City next week against Iowa State, but this one's going to get a little bit interesting. I can almost promise you that. Moving on, Abilene Christian against Texas Tech got weird. And again, I realize I have not changed the picture on this one. Apologies again. But Texas Tech escaped. There's no two ways to put that. This one was ugly from Texas Tech, especially on the defensive side of the ball. ASU had a drop in the end zone with about 9 seconds left that could have gotten them the win. They were forced to kick a field goal, force overtime, and then mixed a 2-point conversion at the end of that one to lose. So this one almost got really sketchy, and they almost lost another game to a lower-ranked opponent. They lost to Wyoming a year ago, almost lost to Abilene Christian in this one, and they go to Washington State, North Texas, and then ASU. We'll see what they can do, but as of right now, this Texas Tech team looks all over the place, at the very least. And then finally, we have a game tonight. I was going to preview this game in full length. Did not get the time because of all the crazy stuff that happened, but Florida State is favored by 16.5 over Boston College tonight, over under at 49.5. This one's going to be fun. There's no doubt about that. I think Thomas Castellanos can cause some problems for that Florida State offense or that Florida State defense, and if they have not fixed the stuff on the offensive line and defensive line from a week ago, this one could get a little bit sketchy for Florida State. Now, I do think Florida State wins this one. If I'm making a pick, I would say Florida State by about 17 or 20. I think they're going to send a little bit more of a message that they're not quite as bad as they looked a week ago. Maybe it's not perfect, but I think they're coming out into this one and knowing that they have to win, so I expect them to get the win in this one. It's going to be a little bit ugly at times, I would have to assume, but I like Florida State to win and pull away late in that one. But overall, Week 1 was wild, and it's not quite done yet. We do have that one tonight, but overall, it was all over the place. It was absolutely off the walls, and there is plenty others to get to. Tomorrow, we will absolutely get into what happened in Ann Arbor and what happened over in Eugene, because those were very, very weird. We'll get into the dominance that happened in Austin and in Tuscaloosa and in Oxford and in Auburn, Alabama. A ton of really, really good performances all around the country, but we'll do probably another whip around tomorrow just to give everyone a final thing for Week 1, and then we're on to Week 2. It's a very, very quick-moving season, but we're underway. Cannot wait to get into the rest of this thing, and Week 1 definitely delivered. Not necessarily the big-time upsets we were looking for, but some really, really good games, and we got another great week in Week 2. So we'll break that down when it comes, but that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all the social pages for all the content and updates you could possibly need. We have really incredible people doing awesome work across every sport you could want. So if you're an NFL guy as well as a college football guy, we have you covered. If you love tennis, we probably have you covered one way or the other. So no worries, anything you need in the world of sports, come on over to GSMC and we have you totally covered. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.